If there is a leader whom everybody wants to hear, it's Julius Malema, the parliament member of South Africa. He is the one who does not feel shy about exposing, criticizing, and grilling politicians of not only the West, but of Africa as well. Even though he usually slams the Western countries' imperial policies and exploitation in Africa, he also does not leave African leaders when they forget what they are supposed to do. Western countries indeed try to suppress and blackmail African leaders who are in power in their countries. However, when African leaders can independently go against the West and stand for what's right, they usually don't take a stand at all. This makes Julius Malema angry, and he conveys his anger in his speeches. We have seen what's happening in Gaza, where over 20,000 people have been killed. Buildings, houses, and hospitals have been leveled, and destruction is the new norm. At this point, when African leaders should condemn Israel for bombing civilians, they are silent instead. And Julius Malema has something for them to say. In his latest speech, he grilled these African leaders, taking their names directly. But what did he say, and how his open criticism has threatened his life? Let's know everything in this video. It's just unbelievable how Julius Malema does not feel any fear while taking names directly. We have seen that even the most powerful Western leaders like Joe Biden and European presidents have to bow before Israel. But for Julius Malema, everyone is equal, especially when an entity is unleashing horrible brutalities. Therefore, in his speech, Malema argued that Africa's criticism is not directed at Jewish children, but at the Zionist apartheid state, the State of Israel. It's the oppressive and discriminatory system implemented by Israel against the Palestinian people. It aligns with the United Nations definition of apartheid, which refers to a system of institutionalized racial segregation and discrimination. Even Amnesty International has called Israel an apartheid state that is carrying out atrocities on Palestinians. Malema argued that Israel's policies and practices towards Palestinians share similarities with those of the apartheid regime in South Africa. For example, just before the conflicts began, Israel had been systematically seizing Palestinian land and expanding Jewish settlements in occupied territories, leading to the displacement of millions of Palestinians and the fragmentation of their communities. But the conflict presented a blatant and naked form of direct havoc being wreaked on Palestinians. Before this, Palestinians in the occupied territories faced strict limitations on movement, requiring Israeli permits to travel within the West Bank. They often experienced denial of access to their own land and property. Ambulances carrying Palestinian patients and crossing cities were made to wait for hours, making them realize that they were worse than animals. Also, Palestinians in the occupied territories are subject to a distinct legal system from Israeli Jews, criticized for discrimination and a lack of due process and fairness. Palestinians are denied citizenship in Israel despite living in the same territory, depriving them of equal rights and protections enjoyed by Israeli Jews. They also encounter economic discrimination, restricting their access to employment, education, and healthcare. This has led to widespread poverty and unemployment among Palestinians. While the Israeli government rejects accusations of practicing apartheid, citing security reasons for its policies, the conflict now has shown that all this was true. Malema argued that the apartheid era in South Africa and the system of oppression faced by Palestinians in Israel exhibit significant parallels, leading to the term Zionist apartheid for the latter. Both systems involve institutionalized racial segregation, discrimination, and dispossession. Commonalities in these apartheid systems are evident. Firstly, both enforce physical separation between dominant and marginalized groups, with South Africa segregating people by race and Israel fostering de facto segregation between Palestinians and Israeli Jews. Secondly, they systematically deny equal rights and access to resources to the marginalized group, restricting education, employment, and political participation, as seen in South Africa and experienced by Palestinians. Thirdly, both involve land dispossession for settlement expansion, forcibly removing populations, and restricting land use. Control over governance and representation is another shared feature, with South Africa earlier denying Black Africans voting rights and political representation. At the same time, Palestinians lack self-determination and face Israeli military rule. That's when Malema grilled President William Ruto, saying that the people of Palestine are enduring what Nelson Mandela fought against in South Africa. Our lands are under threat, taken away, and we are facing violence, torture, and imprisonment on our own soil. The label of terrorism is slapped on us when we resist. You should know that Kenyan President Ruto is one of the African leaders who is supporting Israel in the conflict, causing great debate about his hypocrisy. Malema said that President Ruto needs to recognize that our struggle mirrors what South Africa faced. Nelson Mandela wasn't a criminal. He spent 27 years in prison fighting for freedom, much like the people of Palestine. Therefore, aligning with Israel isn't acceptable, given South Africa's shared history. He asked to be crystal clear, saying that our war isn't against Jewish individuals, pregnant women, or children. It's against the Zionist apartheid state of Israel. Supporting that cause, regardless of one's background, isn't a personal attack. It's a stance against the state's policies. We're fighting the system, not individuals. Malema then narrated an incident he witnessed when he was just a child. That incident today makes him feel the pain of millions in Israel who are being harassed and abused every day. He said that at the age of 9, the apartheid police barged into his house, turned everything upside down, and subjected his mother to humiliation. Witnessing what the children of Palestine endure brings back memories of the apartheid experience. Therefore, Malema said that we can't claim to be Pan-Africanists if we don't stand with oppressed nations. Our Pan-Africanism is rooted in our history as an oppressed nation. Anyone facing oppression is our sister, mother, or father, as we are not free until the entire world is free from imperialism and colonialism. Malema stressed that he speaks the truth without fear or favor. No one has legally silenced or imprisoned him successfully because the truth cannot be silenced or imprisoned. He said that the truth will always triumph. Something should be noticed here. Malema is one of the few African leaders who remember Africa's history and compare it with what's happening at present. He remembers the cries that still resonate loudly in oceans, being reminders of the time when millions of Africans were kidnapped and taken forcefully from Africa as slaves. Malema said that Africans should remember the plight of slaves treated like animals, those who sought help but found none. And today, Palestinians are being called animals by Israel's officials. He insisted that South Africa must take a stance, and the entire African continent, along with the progressive international world, must unite in supporting Palestinians. That's when Malema delivered a huge blow to Western countries, breaking the shackles. He explicitly and loudly said that Africans pledge allegiance to Palestine, rejecting neutrality in these challenging times. He then said something that shocked everyone to the core. The Palestinians won't forget the silence of those who remained quiet. Certainly, he was referring to African leaders like President Ruto, who are trying to prove that they are the most loyal puppets in Africa. What's happening in Gaza is so brutal that even European countries are not silent. President Emmanuel Macron of France has urgently called for an immediate ceasefire, expressing deep concern over civilian casualties. He strongly asserted that Israel must stop this bombing, highlighting that there's no valid justification for the airstrikes. Annalena Baerbock, the German foreign minister, has voiced serious concern about civilian casualties, advocating for a prompt ceasefire. While recognizing Israel's right to self-defense, she emphasizes the necessity for actions to align with international law and maintain proportionality. Simon Coveney, the Irish foreign minister, has forcefully condemned the violence and called for an immediate ceasefire. He characterizes Israel's actions as both unjustified and disproportionate. José Manuel Alvarez, the Spanish foreign minister, has expressed profound concern regarding civilian casualties and endorsed the call for a ceasefire. Additionally, he underscores Spain's commitment to seeking a fair and lasting resolution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Here's a reminder to please like and share the video, and subscribe to our channel to watch more videos on Black culture, history, civilization, and identity. Let's continue now. Even Sweden did not stay silent, and its foreign minister, Ann Linde, conveyed deep worry about civilian casualties, urging a ceasefire. She also highlighted Sweden's condemnation of all forms of violence, particularly when directed at civilians. But President William Ruto does not care. He is not just silent about Palestinian killings. He is explicitly supporting Israel's actions. Malema said that the conflict in Palestine is not a divine crusade. It's a monstrous war fueled by a lust for power and control. This insatiable hunger for domination mirrors the oppressive apartheid regime that once held sway over South Africa. He said that we still remember the dehumanizing rhetoric they employed, labeling South Africans as animals, inferior beings unworthy of basic rights. So, when the Israeli defense minister echoes this language, calling Palestinians as human animals, South Africans know exactly what he's conveying. The message that Palestinians are not human, that they are mere obstacles to be eliminated. Malema argued that there is no war there. It's a malicious campaign of subjugation, a relentless assault on the dignity and existence of an entire people. He then questioned Israel's sick actions, asking what kind of government there is in Israel that would stoop so low as to bomb a hospital, a sanctuary for the sick, the wounded, and the most vulnerable among us, children and pregnant women. Israel claims to be searching for Hamas, but its actions speak volumes. Israel is killing innocent children, shattering their dreams and extinguishing their hopes for a brighter future. That's when Malema said what made the West and Israel lose their mind. He said that there's nothing wrong with Hamas resisting this barbaric onslaught. Malema said that we are tired of empty words and convoluted parables. We demand clarity and truth. It's wrong when you are oppressed, stripped of your fundamental rights, and treated as less than human. The only option you have is to fight, to rise against the oppressor and reclaim your dignity. And that's what Hamas is doing. They are fighting for their freedom, for the right to exist, to live on their ancestral land, and to determine their own destiny. Malema said that Mandela did the same thing. He took up arms and fought for the liberation of the South African people. When you are oppressed, you only have one option: confront the enemy and fight to the death. Why would you want to bow before the oppressor, to accept your fate as subservient? Malema asked. He said that people came and took the land of the Palestinians, piece by piece, year after year, extending their occupation, their stranglehold on the Palestinian people. The world should look at the map of Palestine today, and they will see a fragmented land, a shell of its former self. Malema gave the bold statement that the people of Palestine have nothing left to lose but their chains. They must stand up and fight for their freedom, for the right to live on their land, and to raise their families in peace and dignity. Slapping the West, he said that condemning Hamas is an act of cowardice, a betrayal of the principles of justice and equality. He then addressed the confusion that misguided individuals argue that Hamas cannot be compared to Mandela and other liberation fighters, that they are not the same. Malema asked them to look at the history of the South African struggle against apartheid. Its leaders, too, were labeled terrorists, yet everyone knew they were fighting for a just cause. That's when Malema went beyond what everybody expected, saying that the international progressive community has a moral obligation to support the Palestinian cause. They must provide Hamas with the necessary resources like guns, ammunition, and food to defend themselves against this relentless aggression. He said that the time for empty rhetoric is over. It's time for action, for solidarity with the Palestinian people in their fight for freedom. He then grilled Netanyahu, saying that his actions have been a blight on peace and stability, inflicting untold suffering on the Palestinian people. He said that Africa should collectively condemn his behavior and work towards dismantling the oppressive apartheid system that prevails in Israel. Netanyahu's policies have resulted in the tragic deaths of countless innocent Palestinian civilians, including women and children. His eviction orders, forcing Palestinians from their homes and livelihoods, are a blatant insult to human rights. Malema said that we cannot remain silent while such atrocities continue to occur. Malema said that South Africa's experience with apartheid serves as a stark reminder that injustice cannot be tolerated. Just as South Africans stood against the apartheid regime in South Africa, we must now stand in solidarity with the Palestinian people and their fight against the apartheid regime in Israel. That's when Malema made it clear that our solidarity with the Palestinian people does not equate to anti-Semitism. We are not engaged in a battle against the Jewish people. We are fighting against the oppressive apartheid system that marginalizes and disenfranchises the Palestinian people. He said that the time for inaction has passed. We must actively support the Palestinian cause by providing them with the resources and assistance they need to defend themselves against Israeli aggression. Malema also said that those who attempt to justify Israel's actions or turn a blind eye to its atrocities are also involved in its crimes. We must call upon those who support Israel, particularly those who provide financial backing, to reconsider their actions. He said that McDonald's Corporation's complicity in Israeli atrocities, evident in their provision of food to Israeli soldiers, is unacceptable. He said that South Africa will not tolerate the sale of Israeli products on South African soil and will not be a part of the shedding of innocent Palestinian blood. You should know that Julius Malema is not alone in this cause. South African leaders, including the president himself, join him in this cause. That's why South African President Cyril Ramaphosa said Israel was committing war crimes and actions he deemed tantamount to genocide in Gaza. Acting as the chair of the BRICS bloc, Ramaphosa criticized Israel for what he considered collective punishment of Palestinian civilians, labeling it a war crime. He further stated that the deliberate denial of essential resources to Gaza residents amounted to genocide. Additionally, he held Hamas accountable for violating international law through attacks on civilians and taking hostages. Even the Russian president condemned Israel, calling what's happening a humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza, attributing the crisis to failed diplomacy by the United States. He suggested that the BRICS bloc could play a key role in finding a political settlement, expressing Russia's willingness to mediate in the conflict. It's worth noting that South Africa, critical of Israel over the Gaza war, had previously filed a request with the International Criminal Court to investigate alleged war crimes. Ramaphosa urged the International Criminal Court to initiate prosecutions urgently, calling for a ceasefire and the deployment of a UN force to monitor it. Also, the majority of South African lawmakers voted to close the Israeli embassy and end diplomatic ties with Israel until a ceasefire in Gaza is agreed upon. Now, let's know how Julius Malema is being tried to be punished. Even though Julius Malema said that he is scared of no one, not even President Ruto, he is now being tried to give a shock. Recently, 6 members of parliament, including Julius Malema, the leader of EFF, faced substantial penalties imposed by parliament, which included the withholding of a month's salary. However, this is not in response to what Malema said about Israel and other African leaders. But the timing of these two events synchronizes, hinting that Julius is being punished to tone down. The South African Parliament issued a statement stating that the Powers and Privileges Committee found the lawmakers guilty of violating the Powers, Privileges, and Immunities Act. The committee also mandated them to issue personal apologies in the House to the President, the Speaker, and the people of South Africa. The 6 MPs facing penalties are Julius Malema, Floyd Shivambu, Marshall Dlamini, Sinawo Tambo, Vuyani Pambo, and Dr. Mbuyiseni Ndlozi. The committee's chairperson, Violet Siwela, announced the decision that each member would be suspended without pay for the month of February. The apparent reason for this suspension is the incident that took place on February 9, 2023, when the MPs rushed to the podium during President Cyril Ramaphosa's State of the Nation address. Security services subsequently removed them. At that time, President Ramaphosa faced corruption allegations and protests over the country's frequent power cuts, with the EFF, the country's second-largest opposition group in parliament, calling for his resignation. It appears that no matter how everyone tries to keep Julius Malema silent, he will never. You can understand this by understanding the words he said about the Kenyan President Williams Ruto while standing in Kenya. He did not care about being arrested for openly condemning Ruto in such a way. It becomes clear that even if all African leaders change sides and do not stand against evil, Malema will always take the right side. Not only that, but he will ensure he gives a good beating and slamming to all the African leaders who are betraying the cause. Since Malema is the leader of the second largest party in South Africa, his words carry more weight than anyone else's. That's why the Western leaders have been shocked to listen to his speech in which he supported Palestine and Hamas's struggle for freedom. What do you think? Should African leaders condemn Israel's action in Gaza and stand with Palestine? Or should they isolate themselves from the conflict? Let us know whether you agree with Julius Malema that Africans should not be scared of Israel. Do you want to watch more videos like this one? If yes, subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon next to it. We have decided to bring videos on something nobody talks about: the Black culture, civilization, history, and evidence about how glorious Blacks have been. Thanks for watching, and until the next video, stay tuned.